Good day. Vincent Sarroino from GroupeSarroino, Keller Williams Prestige. I'm happy to be here today with my colleague, supplier, veteran certified land surveyor, Mr. Normand Jean. And I'm not calling you a veteran because you're old. I'm calling you a veteran because you have so much experience in the landscaping business, and your expertise is fundamental. Providing a certificate of location, not only from a legal standpoint and a requirement by law, but to provide knowledge to a seller and a buyer, both equally. So that being said, Normand, again, thank you for being here, and I would like to pass it on to you to maybe you can share your profile as Montreal's most experienced, one of the most experienced land surveyors, and your experience in years as a land surveyor, and that of Groupe SR Arpenteur, which is your partnership with the company, the land surveying company, and your colleagues.
Yes. Bonjour, hi. My name is Normand Jean. I'm a Quebec land surveyor. I've been in the business for about 20 years and a qualified land surveyor for the past 17 years. Okay, I'm an associate, vice president at GroupeSarroino, arpenteur-geometres. I've been with that company for 3.5 years, and before that I had my own company, which I worked solely from that point on. But I've been in the business for about 17 years. I'm not the most experienced, but I believe I have a solid experience, mostly Montreal, West Island region, which I had a lot of business that I had with you previously.
Well, great. Thank you for that. And just to highlight, I've been working with you since I started in this business. Mm-hmm. We met each other right on the onset when I started, which was 15 years ago. And I'm happy to say I was very happy that I found you, because over the years we've had some challenging situations where you were able to help navigate, or help the sellers navigate where there was situations where there was encroachments or certain things, and you were able to take an extra step in helping. And I appreciate that from a broker's perspective, and all my clients have always that had these issues, and you were able to help resolve them. I really appreciate it. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you.
Before we get going. The number one reason is we need a certificate in Quebec is to understand the cadastral status of a property. Is that correct?
Basically, a location certificate, okay, is basically sort of getting a health status on a property in regard to, I would say, cadastre, the actual dimensions. You might have servitude, encroachment, might be flood zones, new zoning bylaws, airport area, restrictive areas, and so on and so forth. So basically, it tells the person, well, that's the status of your property in terms of those elements. And it helps a person make his mind on saying, okay, well, basically, this is what I'm selling, and this is what I'm buying. Okay, so that's the main point of this. And in Quebec right now, it is mandatory, not by the land surveyors, l'Ordre des arpenteurs-geomètres du Québec, but it is mandatory by la Chambre des notaires, which makes it mandatory to get a new location certificate if it is older than 10 years old, even for condos, okay? But if there has been changes, you need to update it regardless. So if you put in a new pool 3 years ago, or removed the shed, or add a new heat pump, basically you would need a new location certificate at that point on. So it has to state, it has to reflect the actual property that you're selling. So that's why it's mandatory.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. Another, maybe a side, a question, subsequent question to that is, how long has it been mandatory to have after 10 years to have a new certificate of location. There was a cadastral reform.
Yes, there was a cadastral reform done about 20 odd years ago, between 20 and 25 years ago in the Montreal region. Okay, before we had cadastres of parishes. Okay, you might see the odd number 268-1 or -15 or whatever, and now there's a 7-digit lot number. So you might have number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on and so forth. And it's all one single cadastre for the Quebec region. So if the property, actually it's older than 10 years because it was done about 20 odd years ago, but a change in cadastre is sufficient to require a new location certificate. But as for la Chambre des Notaires, I believe it was done about 3 years ago, in which they made it mandatory to have a recent.
In terms of certificate location, what is legal compliance?
Okay, well, compliance from a land surveyor's perspective is mostly based on the actual bylaw of the city, okay? So it's mostly done in regard to distances you have from the property lines, from the boundary. So basically we want to say that the house you have on is in compliance with the actual rules we have in effect in that city. Same goes for sheds, same goes for heat pumps, same goes for swimming pool, either be above ground or not. There are rules. And sometimes what happens is that when the house was put up 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, it was built according to that bylaw of that period in time. Now, bylaws change every, I would say, 10, 15, 20 odd years. And by that time, when we do a location certificate, that building or that shed or that pool might not be in compliance with the actual zoning bylaw. Might have grandfather rights, might not. It depends.
In circumstances where it doesn't have grandfather laws.
Okay. Actually, land surveyors are no longer allowed to say it has grandfather rights. And we're not allowed by l'Ordre des arpenteurs. That obligation was removed from us about 5, 6 years ago. But we can help. Okay, we can find out from the actual permit construction building, and from the actual zoning bylaw at that point in time, if the building, when it was raised, was okay. Same goes for the swimming pool, same goes for various items, okay? But sometimes it doesn't, and there are tools that we can work with and do, and we can propose things to either to the notary, either to the client, either to working with the boroughs.
Yeah, there's something called a minor derogation or
a minor exemption, exactly.
Exemption.
So basically, a minor exemption is when we're asking the city for leniency in regards to one single lot, in regard to one element. So a good example of this is your house is supposed to be at a minimum distance of 7 meters. It's at 6 meters, but when it was built, it was okay. So we might ask the city, okay, well, would you consider the minor exemption? Would you grant us, so quote unquote, a permission to remain as such for the time being?
What is, in terms of, what is an accurate property description and why is it important?
Okay, we were talking about the cadastral renovation a few years back, okay? So just give a rough example. You might have a lot that's 60 feet by 100 feet deep, okay? But when we do the actual survey, we find out that the actual measurements of your lot is not 60 by 100. Might be 61 by 99, might be 60 by 101. In that situation, we have to describe. So basically, the land surveyor can certify that the property you have, those are the accurate dimension of your property. I would say between the previous cadastres, the parishes, you'd have about 90-95% of those properties from that cadastre to the new Quebec cadastre that are identical. But there are times that there are discrepancies, and we have to outline them, and we have to explain them as well to the client. Say, okay, well, basically, you thought you had 60 by 100, you have 61 by 100. So sometimes it's a gain, sometimes it's a loss, but nonetheless, it's the same property. Okay.
Why is it so important to identify compliance issues?
Okay. I would say that if you are into a situation where you're going to go into selling your house, it is to get this location certificate done early. If you have issues that come up, I would say most of the certificate we do, there are issues. I would say most of these issues are not all that serious. You might have a little bit of an encroachment, which is not all that important, but you might have a serious issue. I would say, let's say swimming pool, that is too close to the property line. Might bug some people when they want to buy, they might scare them away. So, but there are tools you can use at that point on, either by removal, changing a spot, getting a minor exemption, or simply talking with the notary, which will give us advice on this situation, mostly through title insurance.
Title insurance, yes, absolutely. And most of the time, we've talked about this before, the QLS are acquired by law to, when it comes to compliance, you'd mentioned a lot about, you always talk about the QLS and what their guidelines are.
We have to describe the situation of the building in regard to the actual zoning bylaw and actual, I would say, flood zone, same goes for everything. It's like a snapshot in time. What is the situation of this property at this point on, okay? Now, if there are situations where we might find that perhaps when it was built, at that point on was okay, we might help along. Sometimes we need to do a little bit of extra work for this, sometimes not. And sometimes we just talk with the notary and say, well, this is not an important issue at all. I would give an example that you have a fence that's overlapping your neighbor's property by a few inches, not important at all. And I would sort of calm down the situation.
So Normand, we were talking about subsequent questions pertaining to compliance issues and the QLS, how they are required to law to address those compliance issues. And you were talking about zoning bylaws. And so if you can maybe continue to elaborate on that point.
Yeah, basically the compliance from a land surveyor's perspective is basically in regard to the distance from that object, that building, that accessory building to the boundary, okay? So there are in the actual zoning bylaw minimum distance that you have to respect. If you don't, we have to outline them in the location certificate. Now, one of the things we have to do as a land surveyor is put things in perspective. You might have something that is in non-compliance, but it does not have a real serious impact on the property value. But you might have some impact on something that has a serious impact. So let's for intent and purpose, talk about a house that's too close to a boundary. Basically, there are tools that we can use. So my responsibility is to advise the client of the situation and to advise him that there are tools that they can use. So either through a minor exemption process, either through a negotiation. I'll try to always involve the notary in this. And we could always try to find out if at the moment that the house was raised, was it done in compliance to the actual zoning bylaws of the 60s, 50s, 40s, 70s, and so on. Okay. So this is where we can help.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you so much for that. So what are the potential disclosure of changes from an original certificate?
Okay, like mostly what we have is when you have sometimes I see some very old location certificate on which you only have the basic outline of the house. You don't have the stairs, you don't have the garage, you don't have the fences, you don't have the edges. But beside that really simplistic view of the house, most of the certificate of location either be 5, 10, 20 years old. They have fences, they have cedar edges, but these things change. And people, sometimes I find it always funny when I talk to a person, were there any changes done? And they say no, but when we go on site, we find out that it's not the same fence, not the same cedar edge, not the same shed. So those things have to be reflected. Like I said before, a location certificate is like a snapshot in time. This is what you have on such and such a date, okay? And those are the elements. And you have to remember that things change throughout the years. I would say because of the major flood zones, the floods we had in 2017 and 2019, all the rulings have changed and the zones have changed as well. So you might have a situation where a location certificate was done 6-7 years ago, but because they have changed, that might have a major impact for both the seller and the buyer.
That's a very valid point. I believe it's an ongoing situation, depending on the municipality as well. But I think overall in Quebec, for flood zones, and I think there's not a lot of flexibility when it comes to that. So that's a really valid point, and maybe another time I'll invite you to discuss that in detail together, because there's people that want to buy waterfront properties and might think twice about doing that just because of that. So maybe we can see the pros and cons and discuss that at another time. So thank you very much. Going back to the last question. The disclosures of changes from the original certificate, and why does this help the seller in the eyes of the public when they're doing this?
I would say that basically it's transparency. You want to show the person you're selling to the actual situation of a lot. And let's say for intent and purpose, you have something that is wrong. Okay, let's say your swimming pool is too close to the property line. Basically, that person that buys cannot come back 5 years later and say, you never told me. Or you're very close to a railroad, which you would be impacted by noise. It is in the location certificate. So this way, it protects the seller and it protects the buyer as well, because the buyer actually, when he buys the property, he is made aware of the situation. So I think it is a very, very good tool for the sellers, but it is also a very good tool for the buyers.
And also for the notaries.
Yes, exactly.
So that's great information. I'm sure we can spend a lot more time discussing certificate locations and the need for more information to educate the public on them. And hopefully, yes, we'll get to do this again.
Yes.
And thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your great replies to my questions, and I hope the viewers will appreciate it when they watch it. We want to ensure my job is to ensure to protect the public, and yours is to educate and all the notaries as well when it gets down to that point and we're ready to sign. So for me, it's fundamental, and I'm again, it's a pleasure to have all dealt with you for the last 15 years doing this and helping myself and my clients. So appreciate you for being here. And that's it. For more information on Normand Jean and Groupe Arpenteur, please download a free copy of my book, Secrets of the Wealthy Home Sellers and Buyers. We'll add buyers to that as well. And you'll find Normand Jean's contact in there. Please call him, ask him questions. He's extremely knowledgeable, as you can see. And that's it. And if you hope you enjoy reading the book, and have a great day. Thank you.